17th of August, 1944, 02 hours and 15 minutes, 3 kilometers north of Ostend, Belgium. The concrete bunker smells of abandonment, stale tobacco, rusted metal, and something else. Fear, perhaps, baked into the walls by men who fled 72 hours earlier. Sergeant Thomas McKendrick, 32 years old, face weathered by 20 years hauling nets off the Scottish coast, stands perfectly still. His hand hovers over the glass face of a German barometer. US model. Precision instrument. The kind of equipment he'd never touched before this war. The needle sits at 1,005 millibars. He watches. It trembles. Drops. 1,002. His breath catches. Outside, through gun slits facing the channel, 417 landing craft bob in darkness. 7,800 men. Boys, really. Most younger than his own son. The launch order stands 06 hours. 3 hours and 45 minutes from now. McKendrick's fingers find the portable radio transmitter. Stop. He is a sergeant. The men planning this operation are colonels, generals, men who attended staff colleges while he was gutting cod. The needle continues its fall. 997 millibars. His hand closes around the transmitter. For 5 seconds, he doesn't breathe. Then he presses the button. What McKendrick couldn't know, what none of them could know, was that the next 4 hours would transform a fisherman's instinct and a captured German instrument into the difference between the most successful beach landing of August and a massacre that would have made the channel run red. But first, he would have to convince 3 levels of command that a man who left school at 14 knew more about the North Sea than meteorologists with university degrees and weather balloons. 6 months earlier, February 1944, Naval Weather Service Training Facility, Portsmouth. Lieutenant Commander Richard Ashford, Chief Meteorological Officer for Operation Coastal Hammer, addresses 43 newly assigned weather observers. McKendrick sits in the back row, notebook open, pencil worn to a nub. "Gentlemen," Ashford says, tapping a barometric chart with his pointer. "Modern meteorology is a science. We have radio sonde balloons reaching 12,000 meters. We have reporting stations across Iceland, Greenland, and the Azores. We have mathematical models." He pauses for effect. "What we do not need is guesswork." McKendrick writes this down, underlines it. He'd been assigned to weather observation because the Royal Navy needed men who understood the sea. Fishermen, sailors, men who could read water and sky. But the training made clear. Trust the instruments. Trust the models. Trust the network. Personal observation was secondary. Tertiary even. By March, McKendrick was stationed at Forward Weather Post 7. A hastily established observation point in a recaptured French coastal town. His equipment: 1 standard-issue barometer, 1 thermometer, 1 hygrometer, binoculars, and a logbook. Every 6 hours, he recorded readings. Every 6 hours, he transmitted them to Sector Command. The work was monotonous. Cloud ceiling, 2,000 meters. Visibility, 8 kilometers. Barometric pressure, 1,013 millibars. Temperature, 7 degrees Celsius. Wind, northwest at 15 knots. He filled pages with numbers that seemed to vanish into the vast machinery of Allied planning. But McKendrick noticed something. The official forecasts, synthesized from dozens of stations, processed by trained meteorologists, were accurate perhaps 70% of the time. Not bad, but not good enough when you're putting men in open boats on an angry sea. The contradiction gnawed at him. On the 14th of May, official forecast called for moderate seas and clearing skies. McKendrick's barometer showed pressure dropping rapidly. He reported it. 8 hours later, a squall tore through the channel, waves reaching 3 meters. 2 patrol boats took damage. On the 3rd of June, forecasts predicted deteriorating conditions. McKendrick's readings showed pressure stabilizing, wind shifting southerly. He reported it. The day remained calm, beautiful even. 3 weeks before the massive invasion, the one everyone knew was coming but nobody named, he wrote in his personal log, "The instruments don't lie, but the men reading them aren't standing on the coast. They're in rooms 50 kilometers inland. They can't smell the change coming." Colonel James Hartford, operations officer for Coastal Hammer, reviewed McKendrick's service record in late July. Unremarkable. Adequate marks in training. No disciplinary issues, no commendations either. A file photograph shows a weathered face, eyes that squint even indoors, permanent damage from years of sun reflecting off water. Hartford noted one detail: McKendrick's local forecasts distributed informally to nearby units, had accuracy approaching 87%, higher than the official service. Hartford made a note. Useful for ground-level confirmation. Deploy forward during hammer. Which is how McKendrick ended up in that German bunker on the 17th of August, 3 kilometers from Ostend, watching a barometer fall and feeling his stomach fall with it. The Germans had abandoned the position 72 hours earlier. A fighting withdrawal, orderly, professional. They'd left behind sandbags, ammunition casings, propaganda posters, and one FUS precision barometer mounted on the command room wall. McKendrick had checked it against his standard issue instrument. The German barometer read 3 millibars lower. He'd assumed it was damaged. Calibration off. But over 2 days of observation, a pattern emerged. The FUS was more sensitive. It caught pressure changes 30 to 40 minutes before his British equipment. It wasn't broken. It was better. Now, at 02 hours and 17 minutes, with the FUS reading 994 millibars and still falling, McKendrick pressed the transmitter button. Able 7 to Coastal Command. Urgent weather advisory. Static. Then, Coastal Command receiving. Go ahead, Able 7. The voice belonged to Captain Michael Preston, night duty officer. Good man. McKendrick had met him twice. Sir, I'm observing rapid pressure drop. Currently 994 millibars. Rate of decline suggests major system approaching. Silence. 3 seconds. 5. Then, Able 7, confirm your reading. Official sector pressure is 1,009 millibars. McKendrick looked at his standard barometer. Preston was right. It showed 1,007. The German instrument, 992 now. Still dropping. Sir, I have secondary instrument showing significantly lower. I believe it's more accurate. Calibrated against actual conditions over past 48 hours. Another pause. Able 7, what secondary instrument? McKendrick swallowed. German barometer, sir. FUS model. Left by previous occupants. He could hear Preston's frown through the radio. You're reporting based on enemy equipment? Put like that, it sounded insane. Sir, I've verified it against observed conditions. It's more sensitive than standard issue. And right now it's telling me we're looking at storm conditions within 6 to 8 hours. Preston's tone shifted. Professional courtesy replaced by something colder. Able 7 maintains standard observation protocols. Report readings from issued equipment only. Coastal Command out. The transmission ended. McKendrick stood in the bunker, hand still on the transmitter, watching the FUS needle drop to 989 millibars. Outside, through the gun slit, he could see the dark mass of the landing fleet. 417 vessels. 7,800 men. Launch in 3 hours and 28 minutes. He'd been trained to follow protocol. Trust the chain of command. But 20 years on fishing boats had taught him something else. When the barometer falls like a stone and you can taste the change in the air, brass and ozone, you head for port. You don't wait for someone in an office to tell you the mathematics agree. McKendrick picked up the transmitter again. Able 7 to Coastal Command. Request direct communication with Senior Meteorological Officer. Static. Then Preston's voice, irritated now. Able 7, I've logged your observation. No need for escalation. McKendrick's jaw tightened. Sir, with respect, in 3 hours we're putting nearly 8,000 men on open water. If this system hits... Sergeant, Preston's voice cut through. You've made your report. The forecast team has access to data from 37 stations. They're tracking 2 high-pressure systems. Current prediction is favorable for launch. Now clear this channel. McKendrick released the transmitter button. His hand found his personal logbook. He flipped to a page from 12 days earlier, 4th of August. He'd been observing from a different position then. Official forecast. Clear skies, light winds. His barometer, the standard British one, had shown pressure at 1,012 millibars. Steady. He'd reported favorable conditions. But standing on the beach that afternoon, he'd noticed something. The gulls were flying inland, not circling for fish. Flying hard, wings working, heading away from the water. The air had a weight to it. By 1800 hours, a gale had blown in. Unexpected. Anomalous system, the official report called it. 6 supply boats damaged. 1 capsized. 3 men drowned. McKendrick had written in his log, "The birds knew. The air knew. I should have known." He wasn't going to let that happen again. 2 hours and 34 minutes. The FUS barometer, 985 millibars. McKendrick made a decision that would either end his military career or save thousands of lives. He grabbed his field jacket, the German barometer's logbook. The previous occupants had kept meticulous records and headed out of the bunker. The nearest command post was 2 kilometers south. Lieutenant Colonel David Morrison, Forward Operations Commander. If McKendrick could reach him, make him understand, maybe, they'd listen. The road was empty. Blackout conditions. No moon. McKendrick moved quickly, boots crunching on gravel. His mind raced through the calculations. Pressure dropping at roughly 4 millibars per hour. If that rate continued, they'd be below 970 millibars by 06 hours. Storm conditions, certainly. But more than that. The rate of change suggested something massive. A deep, low-pressure cell. The kind that generated waves exceeding 4 meters. The kind that turned landing craft into coffins. He'd seen it in peacetime, fishing off Shetland. Storm that came up so fast 3 boats didn't make it back. 31 men. He'd helped pull 2 bodies from the water. Both still had expressions of surprise. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's command post occupied a fortified farmhouse, sandbags, camouflage netting, radio antennas. 2 sentries challenged McKendrick at the perimeter. Sergeant McKendrick, Forward Weather Post 7. Urgent report for Colonel Morrison. The sentries exchanged glances. It's 0200, Sergeant. I'm aware of the time. This concerns the launch. They let him through. Morrison was awake, a good sign, standing over a map table with 3 other officers. Supply routes, beach designations, artillery support coordinates. He looked up as McKendrick entered. Sergeant? Morrison was 46, career officer, veteran of North Africa. No nonsense. McKendrick came to attention. Sir, I need to report rapidly deteriorating weather conditions that will make the launch extremely dangerous. Morrison straightened. The meteorological forecast shows favorable conditions. Sir, I believe the forecast is incorrect. I've been monitoring pressure drop over the past 2 hours. We're looking at major storm development. One of the other officers, Major Peter Thornton, Morrison's executive officer, stepped forward. Sergeant, the Met Service has significantly more resources than 1 coastal observation post. McKendrick pulled out the German logbook. Sir, I've been cross-referencing with German records from this position. They tracked a similar pressure pattern on the 9th of July. Their notes indicate it preceded a severe storm that hit within 6 hours. Morrison took the logbook, flipped through pages of German handwriting. You read German? No, sir. But numbers are numbers. Look at this sequence. McKendrick pointed to a column of declining barometric readings. Same rate of decline we're seeing now. And here, he flipped pages. Their note. I had Corporal Williams translate earlier. It says, storm intensity exceeded all forecasts. Sea state made coastal operations impossible for 72 hours. The command post fell silent, except for the hum of a generator and static from a radio in the corner. Morrison looked at McKendrick. Really looked. What's your background, Sergeant? Fisherman, sir. 20 years. Scottish coast. And you think your experience trumps trained meteorologists? It was a fair question. McKendrick chose his words carefully. Sir, I think I'm standing 3 kilometers from the water with sensitive instruments. And they're 50 kilometers inland with better instruments but worse position. And right now, everything I'm seeing says we're sailing into a death trap. Major Thornton shook his head. This is irregular in the extreme. We can't halt an operation of this magnitude based on one sergeant's interpretation of German records. And, what are you even using for measurement? German barometer, sir. Fewest precision model. More sensitive than standard issue. Thornton looked at Morrison. Sir, this is absurd. Enemy equipment, personal interpretation. We have proper channels for meteorological assessment. But Morrison was still studying McKendrick. 20 years as an officer had taught him to read men. Fear had a particular smell. Panic, another. This sergeant wasn't panicked. He was certain. Certain in a way that made Morrison's stomach tighten. What exactly are you asking for, Sergeant? Delay the launch, sir. 12 hours. 24 if possible. Let this system pass. The other officers stirred. Captain Robert Hayes, artillery coordinator, spoke up. Colonel, the operational window is extremely narrow. If we delay, we risk... I'm aware of the operational constraints, Captain. Morrison turned back to McKendrick. You understand what you're proposing? This operation has been planned for 2 months. Coordination with 5 other sectors. Naval support, air cover, logistics chains. You're asking us to disrupt all of that because your German barometer disagrees with official forecasts? McKendrick met his eyes. Sir, I'm asking you not to drown 8,000 men. The words hung in the air. Morrison felt them like a physical weight. He'd commanded men in combat, sent them into fire, buried friends. But there was something different about drowning, something primal. Men screaming in darkness, pulled under by equipment that was supposed to save them, lungs filling with salt water while boats capsized in waves too high for the mission planners to have imagined. He'd seen the intelligence photos from Dieppe, bodies washing ashore for days. Thornton, get the senior meteorological officer on the line. Wake him if necessary. Sir. Now, Major. While they waited for the connection, McKendrick showed Morrison the few barometer readings on paper. 0200 hours, 997 millibars. 0215, 994. 0230, 989. 0245, 984. Current time, 0300, 979 millibars. It's accelerating, sir. The rate of decline is increasing. Morrison did the mathematics in his head. If this continued for 3 more hours, they'd be launching into conditions no landing craft was designed to handle. But if McKendrick was wrong, if the official forecast was correct and favorable conditions held, the delay would compromise strategic timing. Other operations depended on coastal hammer drawing German forces north, resources allocated elsewhere, political pressure from the highest levels to maintain momentum after the success of the June invasion. The radio crackled. I have Commander Ashford, sir. Morrison took the handset. Commander, this is Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, Forward Operations. I have a weather observer reporting significant pressure drop that contradicts the official forecast. Ashford's voice came through tinny but clear. Colonel, I'm looking at the current analysis. We have a stable high-pressure system over the channel. 2 fronts to the northwest, but both tracking away from the operational area. Who's reporting otherwise? Morrison looked at McKendrick. Sergeant McKendrick, Forward Post 7. A pause. McKendrick. Yes. He filed a report earlier. Captain Preston logged it. The sergeant is using non-standard equipment and he's using a German barometer that he claims is more sensitive than our standard issue. Ashford's tone shifted. Colonel, I must advise against operational decisions based on uncalibrated enemy equipment operated by... He paused, clearly checking records. A meteorological observer with 6 months of training. Our forecast is based on data from a network of 37 stations using standardized instruments and proven analytical methods, Morrison pressed. What's your current pressure reading for the coastal sector? 1008 millibars, steady over the past 4 hours. Sergeant McKendrick's instrument reads 979 millibars, dropping rapidly. Silence. Then, that's impossible. That would indicate a massive storm. Yes. More silence. Morrison could hear papers rustling. Ashford's voice returned. Careful now. Colonel, either that instrument is wildly miscalibrated or we need to verify this immediately. Morrison made a decision that changed everything. Commander, what would you need to verify? I'd need readings from multiple stations, confirmation of the pressure gradient, current wind measurements. But that would take hours, and even then, what if I sent the sergeant to the coast right now? Direct observation. And what if his readings are correct? The pause stretched. 10 seconds. 15. When Ashford spoke again, his voice had lost its certainty. Colonel, if pressure is truly below 980 millibars and still dropping at this rate, we're looking at storm conditions that would make the operation inadvisable. Inadvisable? Suicidal, sir. Morrison looked around his command post. Thornton, face set in disapproval. Hayes, calculating artillery support timings. 2 other officers monitoring radio traffic. And McKendrick, standing at attention, holding a German logbook like a talisman. Sergeant, get back to your post. Take continuous readings. Report every 15 minutes directly to this command post. Commander Ashford, I'm holding the launch pending verification. Ashford's voice crackled with alarm. Colonel, I don't have authority to recommend a hold without confirming. You don't need to recommend anything, Commander. I'm making the decision. But I want your weather analysis team tracking this. If we're wrong, I'll take full responsibility. If we're right, I want documentation. McKendrick saluted, turned to leave. Morrison's voice stopped him. Sergeant, when you get back to that bunker, pray your German barometer is accurate. Because if you're wrong, I'm ending my career. And if you're right, you're saving thousands of lives. Either way, the next 3 hours determine which. McKendrick swallowed. Sir, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He left at a run. The 2 kilometers back to the bunker felt like 20. McKendrick's mind raced. What if the FUS instrument was damaged? What if German calibration standards were different? What if he was stopping the most important operation of the month based on fishermen's superstition and enemy equipment that couldn't be trusted? But when he burst back into the bunker and looked at the German barometer, his doubts evaporated. 972 millibars. Falling, he grabbed the radio. Able 7 to forward command. 03 hours 18 minutes. Pressure reading. 972 millibars. Decline rate increasing. Morrison's voice came back immediately. Confirmed, Able 7. Continue reporting. 0330, 967 millibars. 0345, 960 millibars. 0400, 953 millibars. McKendrick could feel it now. Not just see it on the instrument. Feel it in his bones, his sinuses, the way his ears popped. The air pressure was collapsing. He stepped outside the bunker. The darkness was absolute. No stars. Clouds had moved in, thick and low. The wind had shifted. No longer steady from the northwest. Now gusty, erratic, carrying the smell of deep ocean. Cold. He could hear the sea. Even 2 kilometers inland, he could hear it. The sound had changed. No longer the rhythmic wash of waves. Now a continuous roar. Like static. Like anger. He went back inside, grabbed the radio. Forward command. Recommend immediate coastal observation. Sea state changing rapidly. Morrison's voice. Able 7. I have a patrol heading to the beach now. Stand by. The minutes crawled. McKendrick watched the barometer. 949 millibars. 944. 938. Numbers that would have been unthinkable 4 hours ago. At 0423, Morrison's voice crackled through. Able 7. Coastal patrol reports wave height approximately 3 meters and increasing. Wind 28 knots, gusting to 35. Sea state deteriorating rapidly. McKendrick closed his eyes. Relief and terror in equal measure. He was right, which meant the official forecast had been catastrophically wrong. Morrison continued. Able 7. I'm issuing a full launch hold. All vessels ordered to maintain current positions. Commander Ashford is escalating to sector command. Then, after a pause, good work, Sergeant. But McKendrick wasn't thinking about commendations. He was thinking about the 417 landing craft, 7,800 men, bobbing in increasingly violent seas, who had no idea how close they'd come to launching into a storm that would have killed them in darkness 3 kilometers from shore with no chance of rescue. He was thinking about the bodies that wouldn't wash up on Belgian beaches, the letters that wouldn't be written to mothers and wives, the sons who would come home. By 0500 hours, the storm hit full force. Wind speeds exceeded 45 knots. Wave height reached 4.7 meters in the coastal zone. The landing craft, even at anchor in relatively protected waters, reported severe rolling. 3 vessels reported minor damage from wave action. Had they been in transit, loaded with men and equipment, attempting to navigate through surf to reach a hostile beach, the casualty rate would have been catastrophic. Major Thornton, the skeptical executive officer, came to Morrison at 0530. Sir, I need to apologize. If we'd launched... Morrison cut him off. We didn't launch. That's what matters. How did you know to trust him? Morrison looked out at the storm. I didn't know. I gambled. But that sergeant had the courage to challenge the entire meteorological apparatus of the British military. That kind of certainty is either madness or truth. I bet on truth. The storm raged through the morning. By 0800, when the original launch time would have put troops on the beach, conditions in the channel were what meteorologists would later classify as extreme. Wave heights of 5.2 meters. Sustained winds of 48 knots. Visibility less than 200 meters in driving rain. Commander Ashford arrived at Morrison's command post at 0900 hours, looking like he hadn't slept. Colonel, I need to see this barometer. They drove to McKendrick's bunker. The sergeant was still at his post, logging readings every 15 minutes, now running on 24 hours without sleep. The fewest barometer read 912 millibars, still dropping. Ashford stood before it, checked it against McKendrick's standard British barometer, which now read 957 millibars, and felt his understanding of meteorology shift. It's 45 millibars more sensitive. How? McKendrick, exhausted, shrugged. German engineering, sir. Or position. Or both. But it gave us 4 hours of warning. Ashford turned to him. Sergeant, you understand that you contradicted my professional assessment. The assessment of trained meteorologists, using data from a network of stations. Yes, sir. And you were correct. Yes, sir. Ashford looked back at the barometer. I need to understand how, not for blame, but because this storm was not supposed to happen. Our models didn't predict it. Our network didn't catch it, but a fisherman with a captured barometer saw it coming from 4 hours out. McKendrick chose his words carefully. Sir, with respect, your stations are inland. Your models are mathematical. But the sea isn't mathematics. It's alive. It tells you what's coming, if you know how to listen. The storm continued through the 17th of August. By afternoon, it was clear that Operation Coastal Hammer would need to be completely replanned. The operational window had closed, but as meteorological teams analyzed what had happened, a disturbing picture emerged. The storm had developed with extraordinary rapidity. A deep, low-pressure cell had formed over the North Atlantic and accelerated eastward faster than any model had predicted. It was, in the language of the official report, an anomalous meteorological event of extreme severity. But that clinical language masked a simple truth. If Coastal Hammer had launched as planned, the death toll would have been staggering. Major Arthur Collins, attached to Allied intelligence, was tasked with damage assessment, not of the operation that occurred, but of the operation that didn't. His report, filed on the 20th of August, made chilling reading. Based on sea state analysis, vessel capabilities, and historical data from similar conditions, Collins calculated that between 62 and 78% of landing craft would have experienced severe difficulties. Capsizing rates would likely have exceeded 40%. Combined with loaded weight, rough seas, darkness, and distance from shore, projected casualties ranged from 4,200 to 5,900 men, dead, drowned, in the first 2 hours. Before a single shot was fired at the beach, the report concluded. The decision to hold launch based on Sergeant McKendrick's weather observation represents one of the most significant, life-saving actions of this theater. But McKendrick didn't see Collins's report. He remained at his post, monitoring the storm, filing reports every 6 hours as regulations required. On the 18th, Morrison visited again. Sergeant, I've been authorized to recommend you for commendation. McKendrick looked up from his logbook. Not necessary, sir. Not necessary? You saved thousands. I did my job, sir. Watched the barometer. Reported what I saw. That you listened. That's the remarkable part. Morrison studied him. You really don't understand what you did, do you? Sir, I watched a needle fall and told someone. Fishermen do it every day. The difference is you had the courage to believe a sergeant over the entire meteorological service. The courage or the stupidity? Maybe there's no difference, sir. The replanning of Coastal Hammer took 3 days. When it finally launched on the 21st of August, conditions were optimal. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas. The landing was so successful it became a textbook example of amphibious operations. Casualties: 47 men. Acceptable. Expected. Tragic, but within operational parameters. But every planner, every officer, every man who waded ashore from those landing craft knew the shadow statistic. 47 dead instead of 5,000. Because one sergeant trusted German engineering and his own eyes more than official forecasts. Because one colonel listened. The after-action report devoted 3 pages to meteorological procedures. New protocols were established. Coastal observers were given increased authority. More sensitive barometers were requisitioned. Training was modified to emphasize direct observation over model reliance. Commander Ashford requested transfer to field meteorology. His request was granted. In November of 1944, he established Advanced Weather Station Baker, positioned on the French coast, equipped with the most sensitive instruments available. He specifically requested German FUS barometers captured from Wehrmacht positions, calibrated and distributed to observers throughout the sector. In his requisition request, Ashford wrote, "While British meteorological instruments are of high quality, enemy equipment has demonstrated superior sensitivity in coastal environments. In the interest of operational effectiveness and life preservation, I recommend immediate acquisition and deployment of captured German weather instruments." The request was approved. By December, 17 coastal weather stations were using FUS barometers as primary instruments. Sergeant McKendrick continued his observations through the winter of 44 and into 45. His forecasts, unofficial, distributed by word of mouth among frontline units, became valued resources. Soldiers planning patrols checked with McKendrick. Artillery units timing fire missions consulted him. The official meteorological service issued predictions. McKendrick issued certainties. On the 3rd of February, 1945, official forecasts called for clear weather over the Rhineland. McKendrick, now stationed at a forward post near the German border, reported pressure dropping rapidly. His warning reached field commanders in time to delay a major river crossing. 12 hours later, fog rolled in, so thick, visibility dropped to less than 20 meters. The crossing, delayed, eventually succeeded with minimal casualties. Had it proceeded as planned, units would have been caught mid-river, unable to see either bank, perfect targets for German artillery with pre-registered coordinates. Nobody kept a formal tally, but soldiers talked. Units compared notes. The sergeant with the German barometer who could predict weather like he was reading tomorrow's newspaper. Who'd stopped a beach landing that would have been a massacre. Who'd saved the river crossing from becoming a slaughter. By war's end, McKendrick's unofficial count of lives saved, operations delayed, patrols rescheduled, movements adjusted based on his forecasts, reached into the thousands. Estimates ranged from 3,000 to 8,000 men who survived because a fisherman learned to read a German barometer better than meteorologists read their models. The contradiction embedded itself in military doctrine. Modern meteorology, scientific, systematic, based on networks and models, was essential for planning. But direct observation by experienced personnel in forward positions was equally critical. The two systems weren't opposed. They were complementary. The models provided strategic forecasting. The observers provided tactical certainty. Ashford, promoted to commander, wrote in a 1945 training manual, "Weather prediction is both science and art. The science gives us probabilities across time and space. The art gives us certainties in specific places at specific moments. Neglect either at your peril." McKendrick was formally commended in March of 1945. The ceremony was brief. Colonel Morrison, now promoted to full colonel, pinned a medal on his chest in the ruins of a German town, whose name McKendrick never learned. For exceptional service in the preservation of Allied lives through meteorological observation of the highest order. McKendrick saluted, said nothing. After the ceremony, Morrison pulled him aside. "The official count is 5,200 men. That's how many would have died if Coastal Hammer had launched into that storm. Conservative estimate." McKendrick nodded slowly. "And how many have died since then, sir?" "Good weather. Bad weather. Doesn't matter. War kills them anyway." Morrison had no answer for that. The sergeant was right. They'd saved men on the 17th of August only to send them into different battles on different days, where some died anyway. But not all. Not 5,000 in one morning. Not drowned in darkness without a chance to fight. That difference mattered. The war in Europe ended on the 8th of May, 1945. McKendrick returned to Scotland in June. He resumed fishing, bought a new boat with his service savings, named it Barometer. His son asked why. McKendrick told him the story. Simplified, stripped of military jargon, reduced to its essence. Watch the instruments, trust your eyes. And if you see something wrong, speak up even if everyone else says you're wrong, because sometimes you're right, and right matters more than rank. His son, 15 years old, didn't fully understand, but he remembered. Decades passed. McKendrick fished until his hands couldn't hold the nets anymore. Retired in 67, died in 79, aged 67, peacefully in his sleep. His obituary in the local paper mentioned his military service in one line. Served with distinction in the Royal Army, Weather Observation Corps, 1943 to 45. Nothing about Coastal Hammer. Nothing about the storm. Nothing about 5,000 men who came home because a fisherman read a German barometer and refused to stay quiet. The official histories were similarly brief. Operation Coastal Hammer merited 2 paragraphs in the strategic overview of August 44 operations. Initially delayed due to adverse weather conditions, the operation was successfully executed on 21 August with minimal casualties. The storm that didn't kill anyone vanished from history because disasters prevented don't generate dramatic stories. But among meteorologists, the event became legend. The Coastal Hammer Incident. Case study in the limitations of model-based forecasting. Example of the critical importance of forward observation. Cautionary tale about over-reliance on technology at the expense of human expertise. The German Fuess barometer from McKendrick's bunker was recovered after the war. Sent to the Imperial War Museum in London. Displayed briefly in an exhibit on military technology. Then moved to storage. Lost in the archives. In 1987, a researcher named Dr. Patricia Hammond, writing her dissertation on weather forecasting in World War II, discovered McKendrick's story buried in declassified operational reports. She tracked down the barometer, found it in a storage facility in Sheffield, packed in a crate with 60 other captured instruments, still functional. The brass casing was tarnished. The glass face was cracked. but when calibrated against modern equipment, it remained accurate to within 2 millibars. Extraordinary precision for a 70-year-old instrument. Dr. Hammond interviewed veterans of Coastal Hammer for her research. 16 men who'd been on those landing craft on the 17th of August. Waiting in darkness, feeling the boats roll increasingly hard, not knowing why the launch was delayed, not knowing they were minutes from death. One veteran, Robert Sullivan, age 68 at the time of interview, remembered the morning clearly. We sat in those boats for hours. Engines running, seasick, scared. The waves kept getting bigger. We thought we'd missed our window, that the operation was scrubbed. Then someone, an officer I think, came by the boats shouting that we were holding for weather. We cursed, thought it was Army incompetence, delay after delay. It wasn't until later we learned the truth. Some sergeant saw a storm coming that the weather service missed, saved us all. I've thought about that man more than once over the years. Wondered what happened to him, if he knew what he did. Sullivan lived until 1993. Never met McKendrick, never learned his name, but he named his first grandson Thomas, after the weatherman who saved my father. Small connections across time. Invisible threads linking decisions to outcomes to lives lived that might have been lost. Dr. Hammond's dissertation became a book, The Storm That Didn't Kill, Weather Prediction and Decision-Making in Military Operations. Published in 1990. Sold modestly, but it brought McKendrick's story to a wider audience. Veterans organizations noted it. Military academies added it to leadership curricula. The lesson wasn't about meteorology. It was about listening, about valuing expertise regardless of rank, about the courage to challenge consensus when the evidence demands it. In 2004, the town of Ostend, Belgium, erected a small memorial near the beach where Coastal Hammer's forces eventually landed. A plaque lists the casualties of the operation, 47 names. At the bottom, an inscription, in memory also of the 5,000 who did not die here on the 17th of August, 1944, because courage and wisdom prevailed over protocol. No mention of McKendrick by name, but historians know, meteorologists know, and occasionally visitors ask the local guides, who were the 5,000 who didn't die? The guides tell the story. A sergeant, a German barometer, a colonel who listened. A storm that came exactly as predicted by everyone except the official forecasters. And a decision made at 2 in the morning that changed the mathematics of survival. The FUS barometer is now on permanent display at the Imperial War Museum. The exhibit card reads, German Precision Barometer, FUS model, circa 1940. Captured from Wehrmacht coastal fortification near Ostend, Belgium. Used by British forces for weather observation during Operation Coastal Hammer. This instrument provided critical early warning of severe storm conditions, enabling postponement of amphibious landing that would have resulted in catastrophic casualties. Demonstrates the importance of accurate meteorological equipment and skilled observation in military operations. Thousands of visitors walk past it annually. Most don't stop. It's just an old barometer, brass and glass, a needle pointing to numbers. But some stop, read the card, understand what they're seeing. A tool that saved 5,000 lives because one man trusted it more than he trusted authority. Because one officer trusted that man more than he trusted the system. In the end, the lesson of the 17th of August, 1944, isn't about weather. Weather was just the medium. The lesson is about truth and courage. About speaking up when you see disaster coming, even if everyone else says you're wrong. About listening to voices from unexpected places. About valuing accuracy over rank, evidence over credentials, reality over models. McKendrick didn't have a university degree, didn't have sophisticated training, didn't have official authority. But he had a German barometer, 20 years of reading the sea, and the certainty that comes from intimate knowledge of how nature actually behaves rather than how it's supposed to behave. He was right, and being right saved thousands of men who never knew his name, never thanked him, never understood how close they came to dying in cold water. 3 kilometers from a beach they would have never reached. The barometer remains in its case in London. The needle rests at 1,013 millibars, standard pressure, calm conditions. But if you look closely at the glass face, you can see faint scratches, marks from 70 years of observation, from a German officer tracking North Sea weather, from a Scottish sergeant who understood what the needle was telling him when everyone else insisted he was wrong. The instrument didn't save those men, McKendrick did. But the instrument was the language through which truth spoke. And sometimes truth speaks in falling barometric pressure, in brass and glass. in the simple certainty of measurement against the complex uncertainty of models. Sometimes truth speaks quietly. Sometimes it takes courage to hear it. And sometimes that courage is the difference between 47 casualties and 5,000.